Welcome to the deep dive. We jump straight into the sources, pull out what matters so you get the full picture without getting lost in all the details. Today, we're tackling something really critical and honestly quite tough. We're looking at the actual price people pay when they call out institutional racism in pro sports, and we're also looking at the psychological maps, the frameworks designed to help navigate that trauma.
Yeah, it's heavy stuff.
Absolutely. So our sources today give us this kind of dual perspective, which is really useful. On one hand, we've got the very personal, very stark story of Luther Burrell, the former England rugby player. He blew the whistle on racism he said was rife in rugby
It
union.
had huge consequences for him.
Exactly. And then on the other side, we have this analytical structure from Dr. Shungu, specifically her 6 stages framework, the SSF, and this thing called the Prejudice Racism SURVIVAL Spectrum.
Right, which provides a way to kind of map out the experience.
Yeah, exactly. So our mission here is to go beyond just the headlines, We want to understand the immediate impact, like career-ending stuff, but also the longer journey, that whole psychological and systemic process someone goes through, trying to get from trauma towards, well, transformation, what happens after the big reveal.
And that cost, as you said, it's immense. Burrell's story really lays it bare. He flat out said that going public about the racism he experienced, well, killed his career, forced him to retire at 34. That's young for a top player.
Incredibly young.
And you get this sense from him reading his words that he knew was huge. He said it was a lot bigger than me. That's what you're up against when you challenge the culture, the norms in a big institution like rugby.
It really is the ultimate professional sacrifice, isn't it? So, okay, let's start by unpacking the specific trauma that really pushed him to speak out. When he first went public back in June 2022, he shared some pretty harrowing incidents.
Yeah, stuff that shows how baked in the racism was.
Yeah. The one that really stands out, the catalyst, it was horrific. A teammate at Newcastle called him a slave and then told him to put sun cream on his wrists and ankles where your shackles were.
Wow. That's not banter. That's just brutal, calculated, dehumanizing.
Exactly. And that leads to the environment, right? Burrell talked a lot about how this kind of thing was constantly dressed up as banter.
It's just a joke defense.
Right. And in that kind of high-pressure team setting, like a dressing room, if racism is always called banter, well, the victim gets trapped.
Yeah, you don't want to be the one who can't take a joke.
Precisely. Burrell admitted that over time he started to sort of internalize it. He said he began to learn to believe that it's the norm and that is fine.
That it wasn't malicious even. That's the really insidious part, that psychological conditioning, believing the abuse is just part of the deal.
Yeah, the cost of fitting in, and if you react, suddenly you're the problem, not the person saying these things.
And he mentioned experiencing prejudice within the England setup too, so it wasn't just like one bad club culture.
No, it pointed to something wider. So naturally, when he spoke out, the RFU, the Rugby Football Union, they had to investigate.
Right, and this is where you see the institution kind of grappling with it. How do you square these awful claims with the culture you've presided over?
Yeah.
Their report came out almost a year later, April 2023, and the verdict was, well, it was interestingly phrased. They found his claims of racism and classism were true on the balance of probability.
Balance of probability. Okay, what does that actually mean in practice? It sounds a bit hedged.
It is. Legally, it means more likely than not. So they acknowledged it probably happened. But, and this is the crucial bit, they said they couldn't get enough definitive evidence, like specific witnesses nailing down the exact time and place to say for sure it happened while he was at Newcastle.
So they confirmed the racism likely happened, but couldn't pin it directly on that specific club tenure.
Exactly. And Burrell believes that specific ambiguity, that lack of conclusive proof tying it to Newcastle, is what made other clubs back off. It effectively ended his playing career.
So the ambiguity served as a kind of shield for the institution, even while technically validating his experience.
You could see it that way. It acknowledges the problem exists, but avoids direct, punitive accountability for a specific entity. And the individual whistleblower bears the brunt.
Right. He pays the price. His career. But okay, the revelations did force some movement from the RFU, didn't they? What did that look like?
Yeah, it definitely prompted an institutional reaction, even if the accountability part felt incomplete. The RFU publicly said his courage led them to take a deeper look at the culture in elite rugby. And they launched an action plan.
Focused on inclusion and diversity, right, for the professional game. Okay, what were the specifics? Because action plans can sometimes be just documents.
True. Well, the plan mandated face-to-face education sessions for every premiership and women's premier rugby club. The goal was building more inclusive cultures.
Face-to-face is better than online modules, I suppose.
Potentially.
Ooh.
And another key part was training all England players, even the youth squads, as active bystanders.
Active bystanders, meaning they're trained to step in if they see harmful behavior.
That's the idea. To intervene, challenge it, not just let it slide as banter.
It sounds good on paper, but you have to wonder, don't you? How effective is active bystander training in changing a deep-rooted culture?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
Is it a real systemic shift, or is it managing the PR fallout? Minimum viable action, perhaps.
Especially in environments built on hierarchy, intense pressure, maybe even some toxic ideas about group bonding. Can a training session really overwrite all that?
It feels like the RFU implemented a strategy, maybe stage 4 or 5 on an organizational level if we use the framework. But the actual clubs, are they really embracing transformation or just compliance?
Right. It requires more than just training. It needs a fundamental shift in belief within the organization.
Exactly, which, interestingly, mirrors the kind of internal shift the person who suffered the abuse has to go through.
That's a perfect way to think about it. So let's shift focus now from the external stuff, the investigation, the action plans, to the internal cost. The psychological toll on someone like Burrell. Processing that constant drip, drip, drip of abuse. One source called it the million little cuts.
That phrase is so powerful, isn't it? Million little cuts. It captures why low-key racism, microaggressions, they aren't harmless at all. They build up, they accumulate into real clinical trauma. And this is where Dr. Magadz's Prejudice Racism SURVIVAL Spectrum comes in. It maps this brilliantly.
Okay, let's talk about that map. It has a negative side, right? Stages -1 to -6.
Yes, the negative axis. This shows the path someone can go down if the trauma is unaddressed, if they don't have support. It's a spiral.
Let's walk through that descent, because it starts somewhere that seems almost logical, like trying to ignore it.
It does. The first coping mechanism, if you can call it that, puts you at stage negative 1, denial and ignorance. This is where you minimize things. You think, oh, it's just banter, or that's just how it is here, or even maybe I'm being too sensitive.
You avoid talking about race because it's just easier not to.
Exactly. Burrell basically described being here, right, believing it was the norm, trying to just fit in and shut up.
But that denial, it can't hold forever if the cuts keep coming.
No. Eventually, the pain becomes too much to ignore. And that's when you can slide down to stage -3, self-rejection and trauma response.
Okay, what happens there?
This is where the psychological impact really hits hard. You start seeing clinical symptoms, depression, anxiety, maybe even PTSD symptoms from the accumulated racial trauma. And critically, the person starts internalizing those racist messages. They feel shame. They might start rejecting parts of their own identity, their culture, trying desperately to assimilate to make the attacks stop.
That sounds incredibly painful, a really dark place.
It is. It's a profound internal struggle. And if there's no intervention, no support system, no therapy, nobody's stepping in.
Where does it lead? What's the bottom of this negative path?
It leads towards crisis. Stage -6, mental health crisis. This is the breaking point. It's characterized by deep despair, feelings of utter worthlessness, hopelessness, and often, tragically, suicidal thoughts can emerge here.
Wow.
So this framework makes a powerful case, doesn't it? It shows that ignoring those little cuts, those microaggressions, isn't benign. It can literally lead to someone's mental destruction. The cost of institutional failure is devastatingly personal.
It really maps out the internal battle. The cost wasn't just Burrell's career. It was this huge fight to avoid hitting that bottom axis. But as you said, it's called the S survival spectrum, so there's a path forward too.
Absolutely. That's the crucial other half. The positive axis, stages +1 to +6, which aligns with the 6 stages framework. This is about moving from victim to survivor. It's about regaining agency, developing strategies not just to cope, but to thrive and ultimately to lead change.
Okay, let's look at that positive path. Stage +1 is listed as unaware and dismissive. That sounds a bit like the negative side. How does that work?
Yeah, that's a really good point. It seems counterintuitive. But the key difference is the survival strategy associated with it. At stage +1 on the positive side, while someone might still internally be downplaying things, the crucial first step towards survival is learning the language. Learning terms like microaggression, gaslighting, systemic bias. You need the words to actually name what's happening to you.
Ah, I see. So you can't fight back if you can't even define the attack. It's about getting the conceptual tools first.
Exactly. Then once you have the vocabulary, you can start processing it differently rather than just absorbing the pain.
Okay. And then you move on from there, building support.
Right, you move toward stage +2, gaslighting and microaggressions. Here, the strategy is about recognizing those invalidating patterns used against you, the "you too sensitive" lines, and really importantly, building strong support networks outside that toxic environment.
Finding people who validate your experience.
Yes, and developing self-advocacy skills, learning how to actually address the racism when it happens rather than just shrinking back.
And we definitely saw Burrell move beyond just personal coping. His public actions suggest a big leap up the spectrum.
A huge leap. When you get to stage +5, empowerment and advocacy, that's where the shift is really profound. The person gains confidence, they actively refuse to tolerate discrimination anymore, and crucially, they start using their knowledge and experience not just for themselves, but to push for wider change.
Which lines up perfectly with what Burrell said. I'll continue to fight that fight because I'm not just doing this for myself.
Exactly. He's using his platform, even though gaining it cost him so much, to try and protect others coming through.
Which leads us to the top stage, right? It's not just about surviving, it's about changing the system itself.
Precisely. Stage +6, leadership, legacy, and systemic change. At this point, the person isn't defined by the trauma anymore. They're defined by the work they're doing to dismantle the structures that caused it.
And Burrell's foundation sounds like a clear example of that.
Absolutely. His 12 Foundation providing free coaching, mentoring, education, even nutrition advice for kids from underserved communities, that's a direct attempt to build opportunity where the system failed him. It's turning personal pain into concrete, positive action aimed at systemic evolution.
Okay, so wrapping this up, what does this all mean for you listening? We've seen the stark, documented cost to an individual, a top international player losing his career, and we've seen the institutional response, the RFU's action plan, the training. Maybe a start, maybe not enough.
And we've explored this psychological map, the survival spectrum, which shows why speaking out isn't just a choice. It's this incredibly difficult personal journey, a journey that can end in crisis, or, if navigated with support and resilience, can lead to empowerment and legacy.
So it leaves us with a really important question, I think. Dr. Magadzi's framework, it's meant for individuals and organizations to reach stage 6, transformation. Now, Luther Burrell, with his foundation and advocacy, he seems clearly to be operating at that legacy stage, stage +6.
Yeah, it definitely looks that way.
But what about the institutions he challenged? The clubs, the RFU itself. Based on their actions, the investigation outcome, the mandatory training, the action plans.
Where do you think they sit on that spectrum? Are they genuinely moving towards transformation? Or are they maybe stuck somewhere early or perhaps a compliance stage, doing enough to manage the issue rather than fundamentally changing the culture?
That's the ongoing challenge, isn't it? And something powerful to think about. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the real costs of challenging racism in sport and the frameworks that help us understand the path from trauma to transformation.